The moment my sister deliberately poured wine over my child's painting, something inside me shifted so cleanly it felt surgical. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was recognition. The instant you realize someone has mistaken your silence for permission, and today they pushed far enough to wake you up. Before I take you through exactly how this night unraveled and why it changed everything, take a second to support the story. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Leave a comment saying where you're listening from, and help this reach people who know what it feels like to stay quiet just to keep the peace. The first drop of wine hit the paper at exactly 4:15 in the afternoon. My sister Rachel didn't spill it. She poured it. She stood over my 6-year-old son Caleb, tilting her glass of Pinot Noir with slow, deliberate precision, her wrist steady, her face bored. Caleb had spent 3 full days on that watercolor painting. 3 days sitting at the long dining table in our parents' lakeside cabin near Northwood Lake, Michigan, sketching the pencil outlines carefully, painting the sky, waiting for each layer to dry before adding the trees and reflections. He was making it as a gift for his grandpa because Grandpa loved that view and Caleb wanted him to have something special. The wine bled into the paper instantly. Red swallowed blue. The lake darkened. The trees melted into streaks. The paper buckled and curled, edges warping inward as if trying to retreat from the damage. 3 days of quiet concentration dissolved in seconds. He needs to learn the world, doesn't care about his little drawings, Rachel said, her voice slurred but controlled. They're cluttering the table. And honestly, he needs to toughen up. She finished the glass, set it directly on top of the ruined painting with a wet, ugly thud, and scanned the room like she expected applause. She got it. My Uncle Dean, sprawled across the couch with his feet up, laughed and slapped his knee. That's a $50 life lesson right there, kid. Toughen up or get eaten. The laughter came fast after that. Sharp, ugly, familiar. My cousin smirked. Someone reached for another drink. The room moved on as if nothing important had just been destroyed. Caleb didn't cry. He froze. His small hands hovered above the table, fingers trembling. His face flushed deep red, uneven and tight. He stared at the ruined, painting like his brain couldn't quite accept that it was gone. His shoulders shook, but no sound came out. He pressed his lips together until they turned white, folding inward, shrinking himself down into the chair. He wasn't waiting for comfort. He was waiting to disappear. He was hoping that if he stayed quiet enough, small enough, the predator would lose interest. And in that moment, I saw with horrifying clarity the same invisible chain tightening around his chest that had wrapped around mine my entire life. I recognized the posture, the stillness, the way he was already learning that pain was embarrassing, that speaking up made things worse, that silence kept the peace. I learned it when I was a kid sitting at the same table, watching Rachel dominate every room while everyone else laughed it off. I was watching my son inherit my survival instincts. The realization hit harder than the cold wind rolling off the lake outside. This wasn't just cruelty. This was legacy. Trauma being passed down like property. If I didn't break it right now, right here, he would carry it forever. He would grow up apologizing for taking up space, for making art, for existing. I looked at my father Thomas, seated at the head of the table. His hands were folded neatly over an empty plate. His face looked calm, unreadable to anyone who didn't know him. But I did. I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched just slightly. The air in the cabin felt heavy, electric with decades of things never said. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the wooden floor, the sound cutting through the laughter like metal on glass. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. I didn't grab napkins. I didn't look at the wine. I stepped around the table and stood directly between Rachel and my son, placing my body squarely in her line of sight. I looked straight at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to smooth anything over. "You enjoyed that," I said calmly. My voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. "You enjoyed watching a 6-year-old create something. And you enjoyed destroying it." Rachel rolled her eyes and reached for the bottle, refilling her glass with lazy confidence. "Oh, relax. Don't be dramatic. It's paper." I did him a favor. Now he can learn to do something useful instead of making messes. "Useful," I repeated. The room went silent. My mother Linda sucked in a sharp breath, panic flashing across her face. Rachel's smirk faltered just enough to notice. I didn't blink. I wasn't managing emotions anymore. I wasn't negotiating peace. I was done paying interest on a debt I never owed. Before I could say another word, my mother rushed in. Not to Caleb, not to the shaking child, but to the table. She grabbed a stack of napkins and began frantically wiping at the wine. "Oh, Rachel, you're so clumsy," she chirped, voice tight and brittle. "Don't make that face. It was an accident. We can buy him a coloring book. A nice one. Let's just have a nice dinner. It's a holiday. We're family." Watching her, something inside me cracked cleanly. She wasn't helpless. She was addicted. Addicted to the illusion of a happy family, willing to sacrifice anyone, especially the quiet ones, to keep it intact. She would let a child bleed if it meant the carpet stayed clean. Rachel leaned back in her chair, emboldened. "Exactly. He's soft. You baby him. I'm teaching him how the real world works." That was the moment my father stood up. He didn't rush. He rose slowly, like an old structure finally giving way under too much weight. The chair legs groaned against the floor as he pushed them back. He walked to the mantel where a wooden sign read "Family is everything." He stared at it for a long moment, then turned to my mother. "You wiped the table," he said quietly. "You didn't check on the boy." Linda froze, a wine-soaked napkin clenched in her hand. "You call this keeping the peace," he continued, his voice low and steady. "But there is no peace, only silence, and I'm done paying for it." He turned toward the sink, twisted his wedding ring, worked dish soap under it, grimacing as he pulled until it slid free. Then he walked back and dropped it directly into the puddle of wine, soaking into Caleb's painting. "I'm done protecting you." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, suffocating, like the air had been pulled out of the room. And nothing in this family would ever be the same again. Rachel laughed, but it wasn't the confident sound she was used to producing. It came out sharp and brittle, like glass cracking under pressure. "Dad, what are you doing?" she scoffed, though her eyes flicked nervously between my father, the ring soaking in red wine, and the ruined painting. "You're seriously going to make a scene over a kid's drawing?" My father didn't look at her. He didn't look at my mother either. He walked slowly to the corner of the room where his overnight bags sat half-packed. He unzipped it and pulled out a thick, black leather-bound notebook. It looked old. The edges were worn smooth, the spine creased from years of use. He carried it back to the table and set it down with a heavy thud that made everyone flinch. "I've been a structural engineer for 41 years, he said calmly. "My entire career has been about identifying stress fractures. You don't wait for a building to collapse before you act. You watch the cracks. You measure the load. You track failure over time." He opened the notebook. The pages were filled with his handwriting. Neat, precise, columns of dates, dollar amounts, short notes written in blue and red ink. This wasn't a journal. It was a ledger. Rachel crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. "Is this supposed to scare me? What is this, an audit?" "You don't scare me," my father replied evenly. "You exhaust me." He ran his finger down the first page. 3 years ago, you asked for $5,000. You said it was for equipment because your online brand was about to take off. Rachel snorted. "And it did. I paid most of that back." "You didn't pay back a single dollar," he said. "But that's not the point. That was the day I started tracking everything." My mother's face drained of color. "Thomas, please," she whispered. "Not now." "Now is exactly when," he said. He turned the book so they could see. Page after page of withdrawals. Transfers. Checks written and cashed. Notes beside each one. Groceries. Home repairs. Emergencies. Medical bills. Each excuse neatly recorded. "I tracked the dates," he continued. "I tracked the amounts. And then I hired a forensic accountant to track where the money actually went." My mother made a small, broken sound in her throat. Her hand started shaking. "You didn't have to do that," she cried. "You don't trust your own family?" "I trusted facts," he said. "And facts don't lie." Rachel straightened in her chair, trying to regain ground. "So what? You helped me out. Parents help their kids. That's normal." My father's jaw tightened. Helping is transparent. This wasn't help. He flipped the page. Bank transfer receipts were taped carefully to the paper. Dates highlighted in red. "This isn't an allowance," he said quietly. This is ransom. I felt my stomach drop. He pointed to a line halfway down the page. August 14th, 2 years ago. $12,000. You said it was a brand partnership buy-in. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. April 3rd last year. $8,000. You said it was for medical bills. He lifted his eyes and looked directly at my mother. But the largest transfer was 3 years ago. The night of the Labor Day party we didn't attend because you said you were sick. My mother shook her head violently, tears spilling down her face. Thomas, stop. Please. You're humiliating us. You humiliated yourselves, he said, his voice rising for the first time. I just kept the receipts. He turned the page. This time, there was no receipt. There was a police report. The room spun. My father's finger tapped the number at the top of the page. $174,000, he said. That wasn't for business. It wasn't for gifts. It was hush money. Rachel froze. Her confidence evaporated in a single breath. She looked toward the door instinctively, then back at my father. 3 years ago, he continued, his voice steady but shaking with restrained fury, you drove home drunk from a party. You hit a parked car. And then you hit a pedestrian. I gasped. A 19-year-old girl, he said, walking her dog. Rachel fled the scene. My mother collapsed into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably. You took our retirement savings, my father said, his voice breaking. You paid a lawyer to bury it. You paid the girl's family to keep it out of court. You paid a repair shop to fix the car off the books. And you told me it was a parking dispute. He slammed the notebook shut. The sound echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. You stole our future, he said. And then you sat here and mocked a 6-year-old child for making art. Rachel's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. You taught her that destruction has no consequences, my father said, turning to my mother. And she believed you. Rachel finally found her voice. It was an accident, she snapped. Mom helped me. That's what mothers do. She stood up, smoothing her expensive dress, trying to summon the arrogance that had protected her for 33 years. I don't need this cabin. I don't need your money. I have my own life. My father looked at her with cold, detached pity. You have nothing, he said. He reached into the back pocket of the ledger and pulled out a folded document. He placed it on the table beside the wedding ring and the ruined painting. This cabin is mine, he said, inherited from my father. Your mother's name is not on the deed. My mother let out a wail. You have 1 hour to leave, my father continued. All of you. I'm selling this property to recover what was stolen. Rachel lunged for her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen. Then her face crumpled. It's declined, she whispered. And in that moment, her power vanished. She wasn't strong. She was sponsored, and the funding had just been cut. Rachel stared at her phone like it had betrayed her personally. She refreshed the banking app once. Then again. Her fingers trembled as she tried a different card, then another. Each time the same message flashed back at her in stark, unforgiving letters. Declined. She swallowed hard and looked up at my father, disbelief cracking through the panic. This has to be a mistake, she said, her voice thinner now. You can't just lock everything. That money is ours. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. That money was never yours, he said. It was misappropriated, and as of 10 minutes ago it's flagged. My mother pushed herself up from the chair, stumbling toward him. Thomas, please, she begged, clutching his arm. You're destroying the family. Think about what people will say. Think about church, our friends. He pulled his arm free gently but firmly. I thought about those things every time I signed a check I didn't understand. Every time I felt something was wrong and chose silence instead. I'm done thinking about appearances. Rachel let out a shaky laugh, trying desperately to reassemble her confidence. You're overreacting. This will blow over. You always do this. You get mad, then you cool off. My father looked at her steadily. No, he said. This time I finished the math. He turned to my Uncle Dean, who had been staring at the floor ever since the police report came out. You laughed earlier, my father said. Do you still think this is funny? Dean shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know, he muttered. You didn't ask, my father replied. Rachel spun toward me then, eyes wild. You knew, she accused. You've always hated me. You put him up to this. I shook my head slowly. I didn't need to, I said. You did it all yourself. She took a step toward me, anger flaring. You think you're better than me now? You think you won because you stood there looking calm while he tore us apart. I think my son deserves better, I said quietly. That stopped her. For the first time all night, Rachel glanced at Caleb, really looked at him. He was still sitting at the table, silent, his small hands resting on his lap, eyes fixed on the ruined painting. He hadn't moved since the wine spilled. He hadn't cried. He hadn't spoken. Something flickered across Rachel's face. Not remorse. Not guilt. Fear. Because she could finally see it. This wasn't about a painting. It was about exposure. My father walked to the front door and opened it wide. The storm outside had broken fully now. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, wind howling through the trees, turning the dirt driveway into mud. You have 1 hour, he said again. Take what you need. Leave the rest. My mother collapsed back into the chair, sobbing openly. Where am I supposed to go? She wailed. It's raining. I have nowhere to go. My father didn't hesitate. Maybe you can stay with the daughter you invested everything in. Rachel's head snapped back to him. You can't be serious. I'm precise, he said. Not dramatic. Rachel scrambled toward the hallway, grabbing her purse, her coat, her phone. She moved quickly now, adrenaline replacing arrogance. She knocked over a chair, cursed under her breath, then ran back into the room. This is insane, she said, breathless. You'll regret this. Both of you will. She looked around the room desperately, searching for support. My uncle wouldn't meet her eyes. My cousin suddenly found the floor fascinating. My mother was too consumed by her own collapse to help anyone else. Finally, Rachel turned to me. Her eyes filled with tears, not the controlled kind she used when she wanted sympathy, but the raw kind that came from losing ground. Please, she said quietly, tell him to stop. I'm your sister. I thought about the years of silence, the dinners where I swallowed my anger, the holidays where Rachel humiliated me and everyone laughed. I thought about my son shrinking into himself, learning the same lessons I had learned too young. You should hurry, I said calmly. Traffic's going to be terrible. Something in her face broke. She grabbed her bags and stormed out into the rain. My mother followed slowly, sobbing, pausing in the doorway like she expected someone to stop her. No one did. The door closed behind them, the sound final and heavy. The cabin felt eerily quiet after that. My father sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his years. His hands trembled as he rubbed them together. I should have stopped this sooner, he said softly. I knelt beside him. You stopped it now, I said. He looked at Caleb then, still silent, still frozen. My father's face crumpled. I'm so sorry, buddy, he said gently. Caleb hesitated. Then slowly, carefully, he slid out of his chair and walked over. My father opened his arms, and Caleb stepped into them, pressing his face into my father's chest. That was when he cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet sobs, like something thawing. We stayed like that for a long time. The next morning, the rain had washed the air clean. The lake looked calm again, like nothing had happened. But everything had. Within days, my father contacted a lawyer. The forensic investigation moved quickly. The bank froze accounts permanently. Rachel's name came up in a tax audit. My mother stopped calling. Rachel tried once more, sending a long message about forgiveness and family. I didn't respond. Weeks passed. Then months. We moved out of the cabin and into a smaller apartment closer to town. It wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. No walking on eggshells. No sudden explosions. No silence thick with fear. My father spent his days fixing small things. Shelves. Lamps. Broken chairs. Things that stayed fixed once he touched them. One afternoon, I came home to find him kneeling on the living room floor with Caleb. They were covered in sawdust. A drop cloth was spread out beneath them. What's going on? I asked. Building a frame, my father said with a smile. For my new painting, Caleb added proudly. I watched as my father showed him how to measure twice, how to cut carefully, how to sand the edges smooth. If the frame is strong, my father said gently, the art stays safe. Caleb nodded seriously. And in that moment, I knew something fundamental had changed. The chain was broken. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, quiet at first, then louder, then impossible to ignore. Within a week, Rachel's name appeared on a list she'd never expected to see herself on. The forensic audit my father initiated didn't just confirm misuse of funds, it uncovered patterns. Years of unexplained transfers, inconsistent tax filings, cash withdrawals that didn't align with any declared income. What had once been quietly handled was now documented, flagged, and moving through channels that didn't care about family loyalty. Rachel called me exactly once after that. She left a voicemail. Her voice sounded different, smaller, stripped of the sharp confidence she'd worn like armor for most of her life. She said she didn't understand how things had gone so wrong. She said she was scared. She said she thought I would help her. I deleted it, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. My mother tried next, not with apologies, but with guilt, long emails written late at night, blaming stress, age, confusion. She said she'd only been trying to keep the family together. She said she never meant for things to go this far. She asked how I could live with myself knowing she was struggling. I didn't reply. For the first time in my life, I let silence do something different. I let it protect me. Rachel's life unraveled faster than she expected. Without access to accounts, without my mother quietly covering her expenses, without the safety net she'd relied on for decades, reality hit hard. She sold her car within a month. The apartment she'd boasted about downsized into a studio above a strip mall. She took a job at a phone accessory kiosk in a shopping center 30 minutes outside the city. Someone sent me a photo once. I didn't ask for it. Rachel stood behind a glass counter, wearing a branded polo shirt, arranging phone cases. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her posture slumped. The caption read, "Saw your sister today." I stared at it longer than I expected. Not with satisfaction. With something closer to grief. Not for the woman she was, but for the woman she never became because she'd never been forced to. My mother moved into a small condo 2 towns over. She sent letters now, handwritten on expensive stationery, as if paper quality could compensate for accountability. She blamed me for embarrassing her, for ruining the family's reputation, for making people talk. I burned the letters in the sink without reading past the first paragraph. I wasn't interested in paying taxes on guilt anymore. My father changed in quieter ways. He slept better. He stopped waking up at dawn with clenched fists and no explanation. The constant tension he'd carried for years slowly loosened. He took walks. He cooked simple meals. He fixed things around the apartment with a calm focus I'd never seen before. One evening, months later, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I should have protected you sooner." I shook my head. "You protected us when it mattered." He nodded slowly. I didn't understand how expensive silence was. Neither did I. Until I did. Caleb changed too. He laughed louder now. He made messes without freezing. When he spilled juice, he grabbed a towel instead of shrinking. When he made art, he taped it to the wall without asking permission. One afternoon, he came home from school holding a painting. Bright colors, bold strokes, no hesitation. "I made this for me," he said proudly. I hugged him so hard he squeaked. That night, after he went to bed, I stood in the hallway staring at that painting and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. The chain hadn't just broken. It was gone. The investigation eventually closed. The accounts were settled. The cabin was sold. My father recovered most of what had been stolen. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to breathe again. Enough to live without fear. Rachel stopped trying to contact us. My mother sent one last letter accusing me of being unforgiving. I burned that one too. Because forgiveness isn't owed when accountability is refused. A year after that night, my father and I took Kayla back to the lake, not to the cabin, but to the shoreline. We stood quietly, watching the water ripple under the afternoon sun. "This place doesn't hurt anymore," my father said. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." We left before sunset. Some families stay intact by swallowing poison slowly. Ours survived by refusing it altogether. If you've ever had to choose between protecting the peace and protecting yourself, or your child, know this: breaking a bond doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. If this story resonated with you, share it. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, and help remind someone else that choosing safety over silence is not a failure. It's freedom.